Okay. So today's lesson is hypothesis testing for a population proportion. So many hypothesis testing situations involve proportions. So recall in our previous lesson that proportion is the same as the percentage of the population. So for instance, we have the situation 59% of consumers purchase gift for their fathers. That 59% is the population proportion. Or we could have 89% of people over 21 said they have entered a sweepstake. That 85% is the population proportion. 51% of Filipinos buy generic products. So that 51% is the population proportion. Or the 35% of Filipinos go out for a dinner once a week. So that 35% is the population proportion. So hypothesis testing involves a population proportion that can be considered as a binomial experiment when there are only two outcomes and the probability of a success does not change from trial to trial. Um, the same thing that how we test hypothesis in the traditional method and using the p-value. We have the 5 steps. Step 1 will be formulating the null and the alternative hypothesis. The second one will be identifying the critical value. The third one is the computation for DZ or the t-test value. The fourth one will be decision making, whether to reject or do not reject HO. And the fifth one is the summary of the computation. So to test the claim about the population proportion, we use the z-test for the population proportion. So z is equal to the sample proportion minus the population proportion all over the square root of p times q divided by the square root of the sample. This is q lang, it's not q hat. So that p hat, this one is called the sample proportion. And recall that the following confidence level are commonly used in the field of statistics. When the confidence level is 90%, the one-tailed value there is 1.28 and the two-tailed is 1.64. So when you have 99% confidence level, the one-tailed there is 2.33 while the two-tailed is 2.58. Recall that less than, greater than or equal, and less than or equal, this is a one-tailed. So meaning to say this is directional. There is only one critical value. If the problem uses less than, so meaning to say the critical value is less than the mean to the left. While if the problem uses greater than, the critical value is at the right. While equal and not equal, this one is for the two-tailed. So it is extremely important that you identify the problem whether it is one-tailed or two-tailed. Next, so let us use the formula to compute for the z for each given claim, the observed proportion, and the sample size. So our population proportion is at zero point 0.3. The sample proportion there is at zero point 0.4. And then our Q, as we all know, is 1 minus P. Our P there is zero point 0.3. So 1 minus zero point 0.3, that will be zero point 0.7. And the sample size is equal to 60. So you just plot it in the given, the sample proportion minus the population proportion all over P times Q divided by N. So our population proportion will be zero point 0.4. Can you help me with this computing the z-value, and then 0.3 times 0.7 all over 60. What do you think is the z-value? Ano po ang z-value?
1.69.
The answer is 1.
69.
That's correct, Shini. 1.69. Okay? I-change ko lang yung layout para makita ko kayo lahat. Hindi ko kayo makita. Bakit? Now, you can find similar problem such as in example number 1 in your module number 10. So my lesson for today is actually the problem solving for the testing hypothesis of the population proportion. So let's have problem number 1. The researcher wants to test his belief that 50% or 0.5 of the population of rats is female. From the collected sample of 23 out of 50 are from the collected samples, 23 out of 50 are female. Would this support the claim at alpha 0.005? So I suggest you list down all the given in the problem so you would have the idea what is the missing and what is being asked. And anything when you start with testing the hypothesis, you can immediately see or look at the given in the problem. So we will start with you analyze sentence number 1. The researcher wants to test his belief that 50% or 0.5 of the population of rats is female. So this 50%, is it population proportion or sample proportion?
Sample proportion.
The researcher wants to test his belief.
Population.
Population po yan. Ito yung sample proportion, 23 out of 50. So the population proportion is at 50% or that is equal to 0.5. The sample proportion will be 23 all over 50. So 23 divided by 50, when you are going to divide 23 by 50, that is equal to 0.46. And we know that Q is equal to 1 minus P. 1, our P is 0.5, then therefore our Q is 0.5 because 1 minus 0.5 is equal to 0.5. The sample size here is at 50. So step 1, you have to formulate the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. There's a clue in the problem for you to determine whether it is two-tailed or one-tailed. You look at sentence number 1. What is the clue there? The researcher wants to test his belief that 50% or 0.5 of the population of rats is female. So what is the clue?
Is.
That is correct, Justin. Is the clue. Okay? So the hypothesis that uses the word is the null hypothesis. So the population proportion is equal to 0.5. This is actually the claim. And then the alternative hypothesis, population proportion is at 0, not equal to 0.5. For step number 2, you are going to identify the critical value. The critical value used in the problem is 0.05, which means that the confidence level is at 95% confidence level. So what is the critical value? The confidence level is 95%. So what's the critical value?
1.96.
That's correct. But since this is two-tailed, plus minus 1.96. So meaning to say, when you are going to graph that, this is positive 1.96, and then this is negative 1.96. If your answer in step number 3 or the computed value in step number 3 falls within the shaded region, meaning to say you are going to reject the null hypothesis. Otherwise, if it falls in the unshaded region, do not reject the null hypothesis. Step number 3 is for the computation. So population proportion or sample proportion minus population proportion, P times Q all over N square root. So you just plot it. We have 0.46 is the population proportion minus sample proportion. Baliktad. Population proportion pala yon. All over our P is 0.5 and the Q is also 0.5 and the N there is 50. Can you compute? Ano ang lalabas? You try to compute, please. Do not just look at the problem.
Negative.
Daniela,
Negative.
negative. Is it Daniela or Chini? Yeah, that's correct, Christina. Negative 0.57. Now, when you are using or when you want to compute step number 3 in your calculator, make sure that when you input it in the calculator, it should be continuous. Otherwise, if you are going to simplify the numerator and then simplify the denominator, and then after that divide, you are going to have a different answer. For step number 4, it's decision making. The Z critical is at plus minus 1.96. The Z value is at negative 0.57. So what is the decision? Reject HO, do not reject HO. The way how we reject
Do not
null the
reject.
alternative, do not reject. Okay? Do not reject. It seems that majority of you forget how to reject or do not reject HO. When the computed value is greater than or equal to the critical value, you have to reject. Kapag mas malaki yung na-compute natin sa step number 3 kaysa sa step number 2, i-reject natin yung null hypothesis. Okay? Step number 5. So, since that is do not reject, then we could say there is enough evidence to accept the researcher's claim. You could devise your own summary as there is insufficient evidence to reject the researcher's claim, or the researcher's claim is correct. At 95% confidence level, the researcher's claim is correct. At 95% confidence level, we fail to reject the researcher's claim. As long as the thought is there, it's okay that you are going to devise your own. So I'll give you 1 minute to, um, digest the solution. You ask question if you don't understand which part of the solution. But if you're not going to unmute yourself, I'll consider that as you understand problem number 2.
Sir, pwede pong pasabi yung mga meaning po ng symbols.
I think this one, nandito siya. Ito ba?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you po.
Population Itong P, population proportion, yung may parang hat, sample proportion. Sige, let's continue. Number 3. A dietitian claims that 60% of people are trying to avoid trans fats in their diets. She randomly selected 200 people and found that 128 people stated that they were trying to avoid trans fats in their diets. At alpha 0.05, is there enough evidence to reject the dietitian's claim? So again, let's list down the given. So this 60%, is it population proportion or sample proportion?
Population
That's
proportion.
correct, Joy. That's population proportion, 60% convert to decimal, that's 0.6. The sample proportion there is this one, 128 over 200. So when you are going to divide 128 over 200, that will give us 0.64. And our Q will be 1 minus P. So it's 1 minus 0.6. So 1 minus 0.6 is 0.4 or 0.40. Okay? So our N is 200. Now, step number 1 is to formulate the null and the alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis there is a dietitian claims that 60% of people are trying to avoid trans fats in their diet. So that will be the population proportion is equal to 0.60. That is the claim of the researcher. So the opposite that's correct, Christina. P is not equal to 0.60. Step number 2 is to find the critical value. What do you think is the critical value? At 95% or 0.05. So, what's the equivalent of 95% in our Theta's table? Here, you can find here. Our 95% is this one. So, ito po siya since that is two-tailed. Clear? Tama po ba ang pagkakaintindi natin? I was actually monitoring the chat box but no one typed their answer. So this will be plus minus 1.96. Okay. Step number 3 is the computation part. So we have sample proportion minus population proportion all over population proportion times Q divided by the square root of the sample. So you just plot the given 0.64 here minus 0.60 so 0.6. So 0.6 times 0.4 all over 200. So what's the Z value?
1.15.
What's my answer? Yeah, that's correct. 1.15. So step number 4, Z value is 1.15. And then we have the critical value, which is at plus minus 1.96. So is it reject HO or do not reject HO?
Do not reject HO.
That is correct, Joy. Do not reject HO. So for step number 5 will be the summary. So there is enough evidence to accept the claim of the researcher. Or you could make it at 95% confidence level, the researcher's claim is acceptable. At 95% confidence level, the researcher's claim is correct. Clear? I'll give you 5 minutes to answer number four. Start now. You list down the given. Step one, formulate the null and the alternative. Step two will be the critical value. Step three is the computation. I'll be randomly calling your name after 5 minutes up to where is your solution. Kagigising lang ni John Ray. Two minutes.
Sir,
Yes, Justin.
sir, paano yung pagkasunod ng computation, sir?
Ano pagkakasunod-sunod?
Yung computation po.
Step 3.
Opo.
I-compute it as if indiretso siya. Huwag pa isa-isa.
Salamat po.
One minute. Okay. Time is up. Can we hear from Andres? Janric Andres. Hanggang saan, Andres, ang inabot ng solution mo? Anong step? Andres? Iniwan lang yata ang Google Meet. What about Justine Bangkure? Justine? Ayaw magsi-participate, ha? Bigla nag-left. Anyone from the group who can share his or her answer? Kahit hindi tapos, okay lang? Someone is raising the hand. I think it's Christina. Christina, go ahead. Christina? Mukhang choppy yung ano mo.
Type ko na lang po.
Sige. But you have to start sa given. Okay, step 1. Step 2, sagot. Step 3. Sa isa mo. So while waiting for Christina to type her answer, is someone raising in hand? Sige. Lorelei Banga.
Yung given po na population proportion po, 40%.
That's correct. Next. Sample
0.
proportion.
Tapos yung sample proportion po, 37/100 po.
Or 37%. So that's 0.37. What's our Q?
1 minus 0.40.
which is equal to 0.
6 po.
Yeah, that's correct.
4.
And the sample size is,
100 po.
what's your null hypothesis? Ito na si Christina. Pero sige, what's your hypothesis, Lorelei?
Ano po? P equal 0.5.
Bakit yung 0.5?
Ay, 0.4 po pala.
Yeah, this is the claim. So the alternative,
Not equal 0.4 po.
okay, so Christina was right. HOP is equal to 0.4, P not equal to 0.4. What about step 2? Continue, Lorelei.
Ano po? Critical value plus positive negative 2.58 po.
That's correct because it's two-tailed. So here, what is your answer?
Ano po?
sagot mo dito?
Negative 0.61 po.
Negative 0.61. Again, tama ulit si Christina. So what's the decision?
Ano po? Do not reject po.
Okay. Do not reject. So what's your summary?
Ano po? There is enough evidence to accept the researcher's claim po.
Fantastic. There is enough evidence to accept the researcher's claim. Okay? So tama si Christina din and Lorelei. Question? Clarification? If there is no clarification, let's have the last example. 5 minutes for the last example. Go.
Sir,
Justine,
pwede pa balik mo kayo kanina sa isang slide.
number 4.
Opo, wait lang po. Okay na po, thank you.
If you are done and then if you think you can't unmute yourself, might as well use the chat box to write, or I mean to type your answer. Dami nagli-left. Oh, mamaya pa ako mag-attendance. One minute. Nag-raise ba ng hand? Christina, are you raising your hand? Okay. Sir, I think it's Daniela Salazar. Sige, go ahead, Daniela. Would you like to share your answer, Daniela? We have the clue there, at least. Daniela?
Wait lang po.
Okay.
Given po is the hypothesis proportion po is
Population proportion. Tama,
0.
hypothesis.
0.77 po.
Correct. And then?
And then, the sample proportion po is 0.69, 55 over 80.
Yeah, that's correct. 55
55
over 80 is 0.69. And then your Q?
1 minus 0.77
Okay.
is equal to 0.23.
That's correct. N is?
80 po.
That's correct. So step 1, what's the null hypothesis?
The null hypothesis is greater than 0.77.
That's correct. Greater than or equal. because of this, at least.
Alternative po is less than 0.77.
So this is the claim. So what's the critical value?
2.33 po.
It's 2.33 class because it's one-tailed.
Yes po, it's one-tailed.
Okay. So here we have 0.69. What is your answer here?
Negative 1.70 po.
Negative
1.7.
1.70. That's correct. The Z value here is negative 1.70. The critical value is 2.33. So what is the decision?
Do not reject po.
That's right. So what is the summary of the computation?
There is enough evidence to accept the claim of the researcher po.
There you have it. That's correct. To accept the claim of the researcher. Okay. We still have some clarifications, confusion about the solution. This will be the assignment to be uploaded in the Google Classroom. So I indicated there to be uploaded in the Google Classroom because there are still students who are, what I mean is, they still send their assignment through Messenger. I appreciate those students who are sending assignment through Messenger. However, I am receiving a volume of messages every day. And I can promise that the moment I'll record the scores, matatandaan ko pa yan. Hindi ko po papangako yun. Kaya doon sa Google Classroom natin siya ilalagay lahat. Okay, wag mo nang umalis because I'll be getting the attendance. And wala pa pala. Wait lang po ha. Nag-leave na. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you for joining the class. We'll upload maybe tomorrow or tonight yung written works number 2. If you need time for your project,
Thank you
just tell
po.
me. Thank you.
Thank you po.
Salamat po. Thank you.
Thank you. Stop recording pala.